Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast. Do you dread hearing the question, what's for dinner? Whether you spend your days keeping up with toddlers, running kids to after-school activities, or juggling a career and family, getting dinner on the table can be a struggle for us all. I'm Mariefiebach, a business owner, wife, and mom of 4. I'm on a mission to build stronger families one dinner at a time, and I'm here with tips, tricks, and inspiration you need to feed your family tonight. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Feed Your Family Tonight podcast, episode 173. I'm your host, Mariefiebach, and I am so happy to be here with you today. Today, we're going to talk about how long does it really take to make a recipe. How many times have you gone to make a recipe and really underestimated the amount of time it takes to get the recipe on the table? If you are like me, more times than you care to count. Most recipes these days come with a cook time and a prep time and a space for additional time. And so I feel like recipe developers are getting better at this, but it's not always enough info to make an accurate assessment of how long it's going to take you to make that recipe in your kitchen. So today we're going to talk about how to be better at estimating the time it takes to make the recipe in your kitchen. And then we're going to have a few tips to be faster and more effective in the kitchen. So we're going to start off with 3 tips for being a better estimator of the time it takes. Tip number 1 is to read the entire recipe. I know, it's really basic, but I also know that I don't always do that myself. And I suspect if I'm not doing that, then some of you aren't either. So I need to follow my own advice. But there's a few things that you want to look for when you're reading the recipe so that you can really hone in on the amount of time it's going to take, or you can find some clues as to how the recipe is going to be executed in your kitchen. The first clue is, do they have you preheat the oven? And at what step are you preheating the oven? Are you preheating the oven at step 1 of the recipe or step 6? If preheating is step 1, it's usually a good sign that you can do all the other prep necessary in 15 minutes or less, because you really shouldn't be preheating your oven for more than 15 minutes for most applications. There's a few rare cases, like when you're heating up a pizza stone or something, that you want to heat up the oven for longer than 15 minutes. But if it's listed in step 1, that's usually a good sign that the recipe can do all the prep in 15 minutes. If it's listed at step 6, that means there's 6 things that you need to be doing before you're even 15 minutes away from putting something in the oven. So that kind of gives you some hints as to the amount of time that it's going to take. The second thing to look for is to look for words that equal time. Marinate, rest, let sit. All of these words equal time in a recipe. So look for those words. The third one is to look for words that help you multitask. Words like meanwhile, or while X is doing Y, do this. So while the chicken is cooking, chop the veggies or stir up the sauce or whatever. Smart recipe developers will have you do these steps, and they will tell you when you have to have things ready or when you can be doing things while other pieces of the meal are cooking. Okay, the second thing when we're looking overall as how to determine the amount of time it's going to take to execute a recipe is to know your personal cooking style. Are you the kind of person who is comfortable chopping veggies while meat is cooking? Or do you need everything in place, ready to go? Kind of the French mise en place approach, where everything is ready before you even start adding heat. When I do television, I have to have that French mise en place. I have to have everything measured, everything ready to go, because there's only 4 to 7 minutes on a television segment. But when I'm at home, I am perfectly comfortable chopping veggies while something else is cooking. There was a local food writer, his name was Joe Stump, and he had this moniker where he called mise en messe. You know, it's a take on the mise en place from the French. he said, where you're working as you go. And I always loved that. And it always kind of stood in the back of my head that that's kind of how I worked in the kitchen is I'm okay with doing several things at once and not having everything ready before I start. But you really want to be careful because there are a few recipes where everything has to be ready. And a good recipe developer is going to alert you to those times where you really need to have everything ready. I try to do that in my recipes as much as possible. Because on occasion, you have to have everything ready because steps happen really, really fast. The third thing to help you estimate how long it's going to take for you to make a recipe is to rely on your past experiences. If a recipe says that you can caramelize onions in 10 minutes, they are lying. I know this from lots and lots of past experience. It takes at least 30 minutes to get beautiful caramelized onions. So if a recipe says caramelize the onions for 10 minutes, my red flag goes up and I know that I can't trust this recipe to be executed as it is written. And I either need to find a different recipe or I need to rely on my past experience and re-estimate the amount of time it is going to take to make that recipe. How many minutes does it really take for you to brown hamburger? Have you ever timed it? Might be a good experience to do is to actually time how long it really takes for you to complete tasks that you do frequently in your kitchen. The other thing is that simple things like the size of the skillet or the shape of the skillet can make a big difference in recipe outcome. A few years ago, I was hired to give a presentation that was an interactive workshop for a school district. The teachers signed up to come and take my workshop during one of their in-service days, and I was teaching this class in the home economics classroom of the school. I had 16 teachers in the high school home ec classroom. They came and they learned about the Feed Your Family Tonight system, and then we cooked my recipe for ginger pear chicken all together. I'll link to that recipe in the show notes for you. Some of them had gas stoves. Some of them had electric stoves. They all had different kinds of skillets, different knives, different cutting boards, because each little station had kind of different things. It was kind of a hodgepodge in this classroom. And they all made the same recipe with the exact same ingredients because I had purchased all the ingredients and bought them and had them at all of the different stations for the teachers to make this recipe that they were going to take home to feed their family for dinner that night. And I'm telling you, friends, there were 16 teachers and none of their recipes looked the same. Some were really beautiful and deep, rich, dark, brown, and some were really, really pale. And in this particular recipe, you want to brown the chicken, and that's part of what gives the recipe flavor. There were different people. So again, their personal style came into play, but also the equipment that they had made a difference. The ones that had the smaller skillets, they did not get as good a browning on the chicken, and that changed the outcome of their final dish. The ones who had larger skillets where there was a little bit more room for the chicken to get really, really brown, it was able to create a richer sauce. But then there were people that had the larger skillets, but they didn't allow the time for the chicken to get really, really brown, and they were moving it around and stirring it. And you know me, I am a big fan of just leaving your meat alone. If you want good browning, you've got to put it in the pan and just leave it alone. Knowing your equipment and how you perform in the kitchen will change the outcome of your meals, and it will change the amount of time it takes. The larger skillets cooked way faster than the smaller skillets because the food took longer to cook because it was all packed together and it took longer for it to come up to temperature, and it was pale. So know your equipment. Know how long it takes to actually cook something. The more that you cook in your kitchen, the more you're going to know how things work in your kitchen, how your equipment works, what skillet's going to be best for different kinds of tasks. I mean, I've got like 8 skillets in my kitchen. You probably don't need that many, but some equipment is better for certain tasks than others, and that will affect the amount of time it takes to make the meals in your home. So know your equipment and know how it works. Okay, so then how can you make dinner faster? I have 4 tips to help you cook food a little bit faster. The first one is do a little prep ahead. Put it on your weekly meal planning sheet. You can get my free sheet at feedyourfamilytonight.com/plan. There's a place for you to put prep. And if you can do just a little bit of prep ahead, then it's going to make getting dinner faster. And the best example of this is to thaw your meat. If you get in the habit of, after you've finished cooking dinner one night, to thaw the meat for the next night, to get it into your refrigerator and get it thawing, you are going to save yourself so much defrosting time and cooking time, and it's going to be much easier to get dinner. The other thing about prep is salt your meat in the morning before you head off to your day, or the night before, because salt plus time equals magic for meat. And that's not necessarily going to save you time, but it is going to improve the way your food tastes. You won't have to take the step of salting the meat. So that's another big step that you can do to prep ahead. The second thing I have for you is to use sharp knives and invest in learning good knife skills. The best class I have ever taken for anything culinary was a knife skills class taught by the late Tanya Tandock. She was a local restaurateur and a fixture of joy in our community. She passed away a few years ago, but she would offer these classes in her restaurant. I took a class from her when I was newly married, and learning how to hold a knife properly and how to make basic cuts, things like how to cut a pineapple, how to segment an orange, how to skin and bone fish, have been some of the best investments I have ever made in myself. It was a game changer to learn how to properly hold and use a knife. So look up some good YouTube videos, or find a local culinary professional who offers classes in knife handling. It is an investment that will save you so much time, because when you know how to use a knife properly, you will cut things so much faster. Along with that is you've got to have yourself some sharp knives. A sharp knife makes cutting a joy. Okay, that may sound a little dramatic, but seriously, if you have ever cut a tomato with like a razor sharp knife, it is just like this amazing experience. It just feels so good to just have a knife just glide through a tomato or glide through the skin of a pepper. Sharp knives are the key to being able to cut things faster and safer. A dull knife is much more dangerous than a sharp knife. I have a whole podcast about knives. It's episode 155, and linked in the show notes of that podcast are some of my favorite knives and my favorite knife sharpeners. And some of them are electric and on the expensive side and not for everybody. And some of them are like under $20. Get yourself some good knives and please sharpen them. In episode 78, Stacy Billis was on, and she will talk on her podcast, Didn't I Just Feed You?, about the difference between home cooks and cooking professionals is their knife skills. And that is how cooking professionals are so much faster in the kitchen, is because of their knife skills. And I really totally agree. Like, knife skills are life-changing. Okay, tip number 3 for getting dinner on the table faster is to do multiple steps at once. And that doesn't really mean you're necessarily quote unquote multitasking. You're just task stacking. My friend Lisa Woodruff of Organized 365 talks about that, how she's doing several tasks at once. So boil the water for the pasta, or get the rice cooking, and then brown the hamburger. And you know, when I say brown hamburger, you put it in the pan and you leave it alone to get that rich, deep browning on the hamburger. So while the hamburger is being left alone, rather than just stand there looking at it, chop the veggies while the hamburger is browning, or get the sauce ready so that you can add it to the pan. There are lots of things that you can do while meat is cooking or water is boiling. So get into the habit of trying to get those things going all at the same time, and that will save you so much time in the kitchen. The final tip that I have for getting recipes faster is, do not be afraid of a good grocery store shortcut. Friends, buy the frozen veggies that are already chopped and already cleaned. You don't have to wash them and you don't have to cut them. Do you know how much time that saves? Or buy the pre-chopped fresh veggies. You can get those in most grocery stores now. You can get cut broccoli and mushrooms and everything. Go to the salad bar. The salad bar works really well if you need like a quarter of a cup of celery or like a little bit of green onion, because you will not have food waste. If you're not going to eat the rest of the celery and it's going to turn to mush in the bottom of your veggie drawer, go to the salad bar and buy a quarter cup of pre-chopped celery, and it's going to save you so much time. Or let the butcher cut your chicken into 1-inch chunks. Did you know that my local Dillon's will do that? Dillon's is a division of Kroger. I don't know if every store will do it, but mine will. If you go and you take a package of chicken, like from the regular meat section, it doesn't even have to be behind the butcher counter, and you take it to the butcher and say, will you cut this into 1-inch chunks for me? They will cut it into 1-inch chunks for you while you go around and do the rest of your grocery shopping, and you can come back and pick it up. So don't be afraid to look for grocery store shortcuts that will make cooking dinner faster for you. So friends, when you are looking at a recipe, read the whole thing. Find out where you can do task stacking. Know yourself and be honest with about how long it actually takes you to cook things in the kitchen. And then use some of my tips to cook things a little faster, like getting a little bit of prep done, making sure that your meat is thawed. Use some grocery store shortcuts. I can't wait to hear what you all think about time and recipes, and if it really takes you the amount of time that it says that's listed on the recipes. So join me over in the Feed Your Family Tonight Facebook group, and we'll talk about that. For now, friends, I hope you are doing great. Take care.